Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Board. Thanks for giving us a few extra minutes as there's been a few last-minute updates. We just have a few quick orders of business before we proceed into the regular meeting. If you're going to be here for either Catherine Conte, under public hearings, Catherine Conte, trustees of the Cassidy family, Sleepy Hollow, which is up, and then Henry J. Helgeson on Brewster Road. All those are continued to May 13th. There were a number of preliminary plans we were going to look at tonight, but those are all withdrawn as well, and we'll talk about that on a slightly separate basis. So, with that, I take a motion to approve the agenda as submitted now.
So moved.
And do I- Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. You only now have one set of minutes that's available to you from March 11, 2019. Are there any errors or omissions as submitted? If not, then I would take a motion to
Motion
approve
to
those.
endorse, approve.
Okay. and
March
do I-
11th.
March 11th
Yes,
only.
it's March
Chair.
11th.
I'll second that.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry.
I need to abstain because I missed a lot of the meeting. I was just here at the end. If you can record it as abstain.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
I'll
So,
second Nat's motion to
Thank you.
approve March 11th with Judas obviously
right,
abstaining.
got it. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it 4-0 with Ms. Wagner abstaining. Great. Those ears, thank you, dear. Okay, so there's 11 A and Rs before us at the moment. I'm just gonna, there's one that's gonna be referred to in previous plans, so we'll kind of come back to that, which is 8344, James B. and Daniel F. Rocket. There's one I'd like to dispense of right with now, which is 8352, which is right at the very end, which is Richmond Great Point Development LLC, 1 Beachgrass Road through 19 Beachgrass Road. They have asked for a request for a withdrawal from that. So if the board is so inclined, I take that as a motion.
So moved.
And that'll be without prejudice, correct?
Correct.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
That motion was made and seconded?
That's not on, just so you know, that's not on the staff report, it's just on the
It's
regular
just on the
agenda, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, just making sure,
All right.
because there's two of them, so.
Right, we're gonna deal with the other one,
Yeah.
but this is the one Beachgrass. So do I hear a second for that request to withdraw?
Second.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. All right. So outside of James B. and Daniel F. Rocket, which is 8344, and we're going to talk about that under previous plans, is there anything that the board wishes to isolate out and discuss? Otherwise, I'll just take a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
And do I hear a second? I'm so sorry.
Second.
Motion is now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all
Oh,
those
wait,
in...
wait.
I have a comment on one of the articles, Mr. Chairman.
On A and R?
Okay.
It's just a point of information more than anything.
Sure, which one is it, David?
8343, 56 West Lane.
8343. Yes, sir.
They want to separate the lots. And at this time, there's no sewer or water service to that second lot that's going to be developed.
Yep.
We did not leave a stub during the most recent construction project,
Okay.
and any sewer would have to come off of Somerset Lane through an easement. But I just wanted to bring that to someone's attention before.
All right, so that's probably best left with both Holly and Leslie.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
That was it for that one, thanks.
Great, thanks. So the motion was made and seconded to approve the A and Rs as we now have submitted. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Great. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second dwellings at this point. Bradbury Holdings is gonna spill over into a public hearing. So with the 4 NRs before you right now, is there a wish to isolate anything out? And if not, I'd take a motion to approve the 4 second dwellings that are in here right now.
Make that motion.
Do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Have 1 tertiary dwelling that's before you. And what's the pleasure of the board with that?
Move approval.
Do I hear a second? Take your time.
Second.
All right, so the motion's now made and
Could I
second.
ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Please.
maybe you, if this the right time?
Yeah, this is it.
All
Let's,
In looking at all those photographs, there were these little circles carried forward on each of them. Is there something there that, I couldn't tell,
The tertiary one?
Yeah.
the way, yes. Or maybe I'm reading the wrong one, actually. Let's see.
6 Evergreen.
This plan? That's what it says, this one has a secondary and a tertiary.
Right. Forget it. I think, it was something about where the driveways came, but I couldn't see any problem. You haven't,
No, they're
Is that
grandfathered,
what
they've been there
Right.
since
I just wondered what that was.
I
If,
will tell you this is a revised plan as of this today, because they were missing an additional parking space to accommodate 5 for the primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Okay.
We did revise that.
but there's nothing different about the driveways where they
No,
hit the road.
it's the
Okay,
same. Yeah.
thank you.
okay. Any further discussion on it? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. All right. That's going to bring us into previous plans, which is 0507 Nantucket Trust, 130 Pleasant Street.
Okay. Wonderful.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good. For the record, my name's Dan Bailey. I'm with the Boston law firm of Pierce Atwood. Certainly Mr. Rector and Mr. Lowell know me, having been here,
to see
but not
you
for
again.
several years.
Good to see you again, sir.
I have been at the Conservation Commission quite a bit. It's good to see you, and it is always nice to be here. I represent the owner of 130 Pleasant Street, the Nantucket Trust, Barbara Lewis, trustee. And she asked me to come down. I know you've had a number of meetings on this. She asked me to come down today to directly represent her interests. In addition, Arthur Reed is stuck in Maryland. So, and what I'd really like to emphasize, Mr. Cohen will carry the brunt of the presentation, but what I'd like to emphasize is really kind of the very narrow question before you. This comes to you on a request from the selectmen with respect to parking compliance related to, a request of the selectmen for an alcohol license. This is almost more like an A&R proceeding than a public hearing on a special permit. Or, it's not a public hearing; it's a public meeting. I've watched some of the tapes, and I've seen a lot of debate that was fairly wide-ranging. And I guess what I'd ask you to do is focus and on the narrow question at hand, which is, is the parking at this facility acceptable now for a 28-seat restaurant? We've backed off the 48 seats. We understand the issues with that. And without anything further, and I'm happy to ask questions, but I'll ask Stephen to go into a little bit more of the detail.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So, as you know, Stephen Cohen, I represent the proposed tenant, which is proposed to be a wine bar that has operated in town and is now proposing to move out to this location. As Dan mentioned, this is not a public not a public hearing about any enforcement action. It's not a reopening of a public hearing to re-examine any conditions in a existing permit, and it is not a it's not an application for any relief or any waivers or anything for you to approve. The only question in front of you is whether or not there is any parking issues that the select board should be aware of for the liquor license. The liquor license was approved by the state on April 4th. You are now, 3 months past when they asked you that purely informational question, and the state did not wait for you. So, to some extent, this is a moot point, and we could all go stop now. However, I still think you should give the select board the courtesy of replying, and it actually has, this process has generated, I think, some very helpful information, and in fact, even though it extremely negatively impacts my client's ability to operate the business at the level they had hoped, it's a good government exercise because it has flushed it all out. So, to that extent, I think we're ahead of better than having this fight in July. The 2007 permit, which we had previously proposed to proceed under, required leases for 6 parking spaces on abutting or nearby lots. Those leases had previously been issued to a prior tenant and were not kept up to date, and my client tried to secure similar leases and was not able to, and therefore could not proceed under that permit. Therefore, my client proposes to proceed under the 1999 permit that was originally issued for this property, which is a 28-seat restaurant serving dinner nightly and brunch on Sundays. That permit is still valid. None of the other permits that were issued were instead of that permit. They were all additions to that permit. And we have the right, permits are permissive and not required to operate under changes. We can always scale back, and that's what my client proposes to do. We do think that at some point in the near future, we would come into the board to seek relief to go for more seats and to deal with other issues, whether or not there should be brunch, whether or not there should be outside seating, whether or not there should be, whatever. All of the kinds of things that you would normally want to discuss and rule on are something I think will come in for a future permit on. But at the moment, the intent is to go on the minimum scale, on the minimum level for the existing permit. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to take questions on it.
Board members?
Yes.
Please.
Mr. Chair. Stephen, it just in reference to that 1999 decision, going back to 28 seats, I believe that was prior to the outdoor seating being approved
Correct.
under the previous owner. Would you be eliminating the outdoor seating?
Yeah, it's not allowed under the permit.
Okay, so you'd go
proceeding under.
revert back. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The 2007 permit went from 28 seats to 48 seats, and we were not proposing to operate under that. The I think it's 2015 permit allowed for the exterior seating. We're not proposing to operate under that. And then there's, potentially or not a constructive grant for other permits that we're not proposing to operate under. That's a legal issue between the town and the landowner that we would like to stay out of. So we're only proposing to operate under the 99 permit. And frankly, my client may not even do brunch. I'm just telling you that that's what's allowed as the maximum permission in the existing permit. If you review that permit, the conditions are that the parking be provided consistent with what's actually there on the ground now and has been for the past 20 years, and that there are landscaping that's provided that's actually more better now because it was required to be upgraded a few years ago. And then it says in the decision that the applicant at the original 1999 meeting agreed to provide bus passes. And although that is not a requirement of the actual condition of the permit, my client would honor that and be prepared to provide the NERDA passes anyway, in the spirit of the application. So I think that's where we are. But again, we're not actually in an application. We do intend to come back for one.
I just have a question.
Yeah, no, please, go right ahead.
If you said this is moot because it's already been approved, so why should we do anything?
I can't require you to respond to the select board, but I think you should.
I'm sorry? I'm asking, is there any reason why we should?
Well, whether or not you want to respond to the information requested by the select board is up to you. We don't need this to move forward because it's not a requirement of the application. The select board might not appreciate you not responding, but I can't speak for them.
Yeah, please.
Question for Leslie, if you would be so kind. The question that's been laid out in the materials here relates to can they go back to the 99 permit, given there's been fact that there's been other proceedings and things handled since then, and that's 20 years ago. So in some sense, it seems almost that was behind us, that they had moved on, and I don't want to offer a legal opinion myself. I'm just curious if you or town council, in your thoughts about this, could enlighten us.
I talked with town council about the matter, and I think the sort of thought on it was, if they've received a permit that allows more, you can always voluntarily do less, to frame it a different way than saying I'm going to use permit A and not permit B. So if they have a permit in place that allows 28 seats with certain parking, that's certainly something they could try to exercise.
And could you also go on and say a little bit more about the status of the parking on Chins Way?
That's something that is, being disputed by the attorneys who has ownership and rights to use Chin's Way. So I don't think that's really something that the board should be involved with. But the ZBA in their 1999 decision required that the gravel parking area, which is on their property but would require parking to go out into Chin's Way, be maintained. So, the Chin's Way parking spaces are not legal parking spaces under zoning. And the parking requirement back in 1999 was partially waived by the ZBA so that those spaces didn't count towards their total parking on site.
Thanks. That's
It's a
helpful
little
to have
convoluted,
all
but-
that on the record if indeed we come back and get to visit about this again.
Yeah, I actually think Leslie's last thing she said is really key here, that nobody's asserting that those Chin's Ways parking spaces are legal parking spaces, but the 99 permit, and I think actually the 2007 permit, both say that they are a partial justification for the waiver of the parking that was granted. So we don't actually have to prove that they're legal or not legal. They just have to be maintained in the way that they were in 1999, which if you go look at the gravel, it's still there.
One more question, maybe to both of you, if you'd be so kind. What if you've agreed that there be 28 seats? What if those 28 seats somehow get, expanded by the big demand for activity here, by patrons coming in and parking where they shouldn't? Not that your client would be trying to bring that about, but I just would like to have a clear understanding about what the parking enforcement protocols would be if it turned out there was a problem, even under this scenario of 28 seats.
Sure, that is a good question. It's a little bit of a tricky answer. So the seats don't actually regulate the number of people in the building. It just is the number of tables and chairs you can have. And then the number of tables and chairs and people you can have in the building has actually nothing to do with whether or not people are compliant with parking in the right place that they're supposed to. The zoning enforcement officer can't go and say, oh, this person is going to this restaurant and they shouldn't be parked there. It's just, not how zoning works. He can only, but he could go into the building and say, you're only supposed to have 28 seats and I'm counting 38 seats. So you have to take some tables out and we're going to bring in enforcement action and we could, close you down or whatever enforcement actions they would. So the enforcement can only be under the terms of the permit. My client's incentive to not have problems is that we intend to come back to the board to seek more seats and other zoning under the current zoning, which is actually much more permissive. In 1999, for example, you needed one parking space per 4 seats, and today you only need one parking space per 6. You need a loading zone, which you don't need now. There's a lot of differences in the MyPod overlay district. So being a good citizen and being a good neighbor and not having parking and zoning complaints in the area is certainly something we're incentivized to do, with the idea that we intend to come back to the board. Frankly, if you wanted to approve anything or place any conditions or anything or deny anything, you can't, because there's nothing in
understand.
front of you to do that.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear on the record what you'd say to that question.
Sure.
And-
So I
and,
hope I've answered it.
One more related question. Is there any space that is going to be there that would accommodate somebody in a wheelchair who's disabled?
I believe there is, Dan. There's a bricked off area on the, if you're coming in on the right-hand corner, I don't know what that is, that if you pull, there's an area that's bricked off that is
Will
for,
that be designated for
I believe it is.
disabled
It-
access?
There's a designated handicap spot and a ramp.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so that's
That's
there
all
now.
my questions. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just have a quick question regarding, and probably doesn't illuminate the question anymore, but he had mentioned the NERDA passes, and I think that thinking about providing enough parking for bikes, say 10 bikes, could really alleviate a lot of the car pressure for parking, and it seems like a wonderful establishment to, you're out on your bike with some friends and you stop in, and I know that one of the problems in that area is there's no place to really park your bike without leaning it against something, putting it on a post,
Yeah.
So that doesn't encourage people to use their bikes.
So Campbell, that's not something that you can require, but I think it's something that my client would do to be a good citizen and a good neighbor. It's relatively inexpensive and it's got a high benefit. The other thing I should mention that is somewhat related to that concept is that the 1999 permit requires that the apartments be used in conjunction with the restaurant, not rented out separately, and that's something that we would obviously comply with as an existing condition. So in other words, you've got people in both spaces that don't need separate vehicles to get to and from work, at least to the extent that they're in that apartment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I guess
Yeah, please.
just one question, just so I'm absolutely clear on this. So the select board approval of the license, was it conditioned upon us giving some sort of approval of the, or saying that the parking was adequate? Or is that totally wrong?
Leslie can correct me if I'm wrong, if she knows, but I believe that the select board asked the planning board to weigh in on this, but also voted to send the matter to the ABCC at the state level, and the ABCC issued its decision on Friday, or on the 4th, I think it was Thursday.
Chairman,
Yeah, please go
I'd
ahead.
raise down. I'd
Any-
make a motion that we take no action since there's nothing before us to be decided, and if the permit's already been issued, I see no reason to be responding to the select board as to something which they don't need anymore.
Mhm.
And finally, since I'm still undecided exactly where it'd come out if this were a question of the parking, based on the various arguments that have been made, and obviously lots of disagreement about what those permits didn't do, and what parking is required, or whatever it is. Seems to me the parking is either adequate or not adequate, and that's for another day, another time, or another person.
All right, so that motion's on,
motion.
all right, so the motion's on the floor. Is there a second to it?
Second.
All right, so the motion's now made and seconded, so discussion phase.
Yeah, before we vote, I was just wondering, looking at staff, if there was something to weigh in from the communication that was going on between the owners and the abutters, before we vote on that, if we strike that down to hear from other people that might want to speak. Before we roll on a no action.
Well,
Do we have to vote? And if we do, I would suggest the negative to hear.
well, no, we're still in discussion phase at the moment, which is absolutely fine. We can take a little more at this point before you make a decision. Because
I
I
don't
think
have any-
that's
I'd
germane.
be happy to withdraw the motion for the time being, if that's
Sure, yeah, let's
procedurally
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm
all right.
not trying to cut off
No, no,
anybody's
no, no,
talking.
I know
I
you-
thought everybody was done.
No, I
Yeah.
understand. No, no,
And we
no, I
didn't hear,
understand.
and as we're
I'll
going to,
withdraw the
I didn't want to
second.
make any permanent decision before we
I
had just
appreciate that.
listened
That-
at the
that's just-
communication
it
that was
really is
taking
cleaner.
place.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Did you have anything else you wanted to?
No, I'll just wait to hear.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you. I think you need to make a decision, because if you don't, my client and Mr. Cohen's client are going to be stuck in this regulatory morass. So make a decision one way or the other, and then we can go do whatever we're going to do. But, a restaurant has operated on this site for well over 20 years. It operated under that special permit. There were never any, to my knowledge, any complaints or issues with parking. This needs to get approved now so Mr. Cohen's client can get in for the summer. Otherwise, you're going to have an empty space, and we're going to have a big land court case. And that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
My question would be,
Yeah.
procedurally, do we have anything before us to decide?
Gotta be
Quite
something,
simply
nobody
writing a
be
letter.
here.
I don't think we do.
I don't think we have anything to decide here. I understand the problem, but I don't think we're procedurally in a
Hold-
position to decide anything.
Hold on, so Leslie, it's got, please.
Well, going into the meeting, I was not aware that the license issued by the
I
state
just heard that.
on Friday. So this is breaking news.
Agreed.
I was, I guess, falsely under the impression that the select board asked for your input because the license wouldn't be issued until you had provided it. So, you know, now,
And
It is possible that the license issued by the state will be held at the town office until they hear from you. I don't know that they legally could do that, but procedurally, they certainly could try.
And the decision, for those of us who didn't quite hear it, was in favor of?
Yeah, so the select board voted to approve the liquor license, and the ABCC affirmed that.
There we go. There's the key I wanted to hear, is the
So- but
ABCC
the letter,
approved.
the letter that you get from the state says, we've approved your license, you should go to the town to pick it up. And
Got it.
you know, Dan, Mr. Bailey's concern is that when we go to pick it up, they're gonna say, we can't release this, or something like that.
All right, now that's important, since, as Leslie said, there was really no information just until you mentioned it a few minutes ago. Thank you. Rhoda, hi, good evening.
Thank you. Rhoda Wyman, representing Patrick Ridge, Director Butter. I guess I was a little surprised when I saw the emails back and forth about reverting to a 20-year-old decision. I've been practicing here for 35 years. I've never seen that happen, but, you know, if this board thinks it's appropriate, that's fine. The one thing we want to see happen, hopefully tonight, is to get this resolved. And we did attempt to do that at the last hearing. We did offer parking spaces. That was declined. I talked to Mr. Cohen and his client before the meeting tonight. What I would like to see happen tonight is that it gets approved with not a precedent in the future. That gets approved for now until they come back, you know, within a year, for 28 seats and no brunch. And I believe that Mr. Cohen's client agreed to no brunch. If any of you have been to Island Kitchen on Sunday, you understand what the parking lot looks like. I mean, there isn't even any room for the clients that are in there, never mind any extra rooms. So what you decide to do with the select board is obviously your decision. I think that you should respond. I think that they're waiting for a response. My understanding is, and I just heard for the first time also, that the license was approved, but my understanding is that it was approved subject to getting something from this board saying that they were in zoning compliance. So it's up to you how you want to handle that. But we'd like to see her in there. I think this has gone on way too long. It's been going on for the 6 years that Mr. Ridge has owned this property. I think I've been before this board at least 6 times about parking, not necessarily with this tenant, but in the past where there wasn't compliance. So I would ask you to try to make a decision tonight, and with not any value for precedent in the future, and to agree to, I understand that you can't put restrictions on it, but I believe that she has agreed to no brunch and with the 28 seats.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Would you confirm that, Mr. Cohen?
My client is willing to give up brunch and sees that as a highly likely thing to happen, but, you know, giving it up for no apparent reason is something that's hard to commit to when nobody else, we're not getting a permit out of this, we're not getting
Yeah.
a special permit. So I think that that's something that when we came forward to seek more seats and other things like that would be, you know, one of the first things on the chopping block. We may enter into a private agreement with Ms. Wyman's client about that, but I can't horse trade with the board when there's no permit on the table.
Okay.
'Cause they
And
already got it.
if I may, since you're the only one
Constructive,
who's,
They got the file.
so sorry, you're the only one who's seen the ABCC thing. Were there any restrictions or limitations on it or conditions?
I haven't seen the permit. I just saw the email from the state saying your
Oh.
permit has been approved. You can go get it from the town. You know, but
Okay,
tip,
I'm just asking, I
Yeah.
just want to be sure,
Yeah.
for the record.
town's going to release it with the understanding of what they sent to you.
I understand.
And we would like the brunch off the table. I believe she's agreed to that.
so I would suggest that in the same way we seem to be able to go forward under the 2007 permit if there were leases. We can also go back to the 1999 permit without the leases. If there was, say, a special permit for a gas station, and we had moved on to another use to try to go back to 20-year-old permit, I think the abandonment argument would have legs. But every permit that's been issued for this space and every use of this space has been as a restaurant. It's only not been a restaurant for a matter of months now. So I think this board really only has one response, which is that if the applicant is proceeding under a legally issued permit from the zoning or planning board, whichever one that may be, then that would be in compliance with that permit. And since nothing is open, you really can't rule on it. You can't bring an enforcement action. There's no open hearing. The problem here is that the selectmen asked you a weird question about a weird thing at a weird time in the whole process, and they've stuck it to you to try and figure out, like, with your crystal ball about what's going to happen. The reason why this is hard to resolve is it's not really even that proper.
But I just want to remind you that the select board asked if they were in compliance, and I don't think you can answer yes, they're in compliance.
All right, so
We
hold
want
on.
them to open, and we'd like to help, but
Well, I've heard
All
two
right,
things.
Ken, all right, hold
Sorry.
on. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, at the time of the select board hearing, when they asked for your input, everyone was talking about the 2007 permit, which gave them the 20 extra seats, which required the off-site parking lease agreements.
Right.
So at that time, there was a real question about whether or not they were in compliance because they hadn't provided any leases. Since then, they've voluntarily said, we'll go back to something that's consistent with a prior approval. So it's not the same scenario as when the select board asked the question.
Got it.
So
Thank you. Hold on. John.
Stephen, you referred to the 1999 decision a couple of times.
Yeah.
And that, from my understanding, from what you had said, was a 28-seat with no brunch.
no good brunch.
Yeah, no Sunday brunch.
No, it's
It
dinner
allows
nightly
it.
and Sunday brunch is what's allowed under that permit.
Okay. I think we're going back and forth, and obviously everybody wants us to make a decision, but we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. There was a judgment issued on Friday of last week. So there can be a permit, but you can't pick it up until we make a decision to give the selectmen. So I look at it like, if we can just agree for now, 28 seats, as you were saying, as Rhoda was saying, with no value of precedent in the future. And I think the select board would like to hear from us in giving that seal of approval. And then I think everybody can open up. You can get the license, you can pick up the license, selectmen will be satisfied, and we would be back to the 28 seat with the no brunch, I believe.
So, John, I think that's a really good idea. The problem is I don't think we can actually do it in this forum. I think the only thing that you can do is say, if the applicant is proceeding under the 2007 permit, then they need to provide leases. They have not provided those leases. Therefore, they can only proceed under the 99 permit or uses allowed by right that don't require a special permit. I think that's your sort of factual legal answer you should be responding to. Whether or not the use is then zoning compliant is actually something that the zoning enforcement officer should be determining, not you here at this meeting. And I think that there's this misunderstanding of what you're supposed to be doing here that's causing us to treat this like either an enforcement action, which it's not, or a special permit hearing, which it's not. I
think what we're trying
I
to
don't
do-
have the ability to agree to that.
And I think what we're trying to do is not to prolong and as Fritz was saying, take no action, because from the sound of it, that's what we could do, take no action, and just put it off to somebody else. What we're trying to do is find a resolution to get everybody to open up.
Right. And Leslie, just bear with me for a second. So I see you concurring with what Mr. Cohen's now saying at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're not in compliance with the 2007 special permit.
Correct.
The 1999 one, I mean, there may be some minor site plan issues that would have to be addressed, but I think that's
We're
doable.
bringing that back.
And you could put that, both of those in a letter to the select board. Under the terms of the 2007, they don't comply and they can't move forward, but they are consistent with the prior permit And then you're not really making a determination about whether they can or can't move forward with the 1999 one. You're only saying that their proposal is consistent with that.
Okay.
And I would like to add to the letter, she did agree at the select board hearing, and she's agreed here in front of this board twice, that she would not have brunch until they come back, and I would like that to be part of it. That's really key to my client's business.
And my client would be happy to agree to that when we actually come in for a special permit in which that decision could be made. It's
All right.
it's remarkably unfair
Okay.
to try and do that here. That's not what we're doing tonight.
Mr. Chair.
All right, let me just,
That's
Mr.
fine,
Chairman, can I
thank
just
you.
say something?
Yes, please.
Okay, so when that constructive grant was given, that's what caused all this. We're not talking about that, but that's the truth,
Sure.
and that's our fault. Okay? We denied lunch to Atlas. We had the bowling alley application floating around here, and we just denied lunch to a place that was in business for years, and now it's saying yes to a bowling alley with parking issues right next door. I mean, we kind of we had this whole mess in a big circle, okay? This isn't a minor modification to a special permit. That's the problem. This is not a real change.
It's an
So that's
informational
why,
piece.
if that 99 decision was 2003, we'd be saying we're going to go back to 2003. It just happens to be 20 years ago. It could be 17 years ago if it was a little newer. It's just the way it is. So the way I look at this is we got to get this thing out of here. This is embarrassing, number one. Number two, the lady, they're not going to give up the lunch grant from the court because it's the brunch grant, whatever it is, because of, this is like an egg in the basket for them. And I get it. I mean, I understood that at the last meeting. I didn't realize that was even what was going on until Arthur explained it. There's way more parking in this area now than there was in 1999, okay? There's on-street now, there's just more aggregately. Yes, there is, Patrick. Yes, there is, okay?
All right.
And there's
Through the
gonna
chair,
be
please.
more, by the time this lady figures out if she's even got a viable business, there's gonna probably be more parking in the area. It's just, this is a situation with all these different things, the Willie House deed that we saw last year, I think it was, or even 2 years ago, whenever that floated through here. I mean, this is a weird spot. This is like Broad Street with parking requirements before we got rid of change the zoning, so you didn't have to have parking on top of a roof of a building. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is a really weird situation where parking spreads out, businesses close, people park at Stop and Shop to go to every, if there was another restaurant on that street, they'd be parking at Stop and Shop to go there. That's just how it is, okay? So I want to move this along and go to the 1999 permit. That's what I want to do.
Judith?
I have a motion that the planning board advise the select board as follows. Number one, that the applicant has committed to comply and proceed under the 1999 permit, including correcting any conditions that are not in compliance with the 1999 permit. Two, that they comply with parking under the 1999 permit. Three, that they do not comply with the 2007 permit, and they do not anticipate at this point trying to proceed under the 2007 permit. Four, that this action is unprecedented and unusual, so it should not be regarded as applicable in future instances. Five, that the applicant and others anticipate there'll be further proceedings later in the coming year to consider whether modifications will be sought, including a discussion about the possibility of offering brunch or not offering brunch. That's the proposal.
All right.
Is that
so
a motion?
Yeah.
I'll
That's a
make a
motion on-
second with one question to staff. Does that, or
Did mine get withdrawn?
does that?
Yeah, you did. You
we-
did.
Okay.
Does that include the lease spaces?
No,
Does
No.
not include the lease spaces?
No.
Okay, I'm just asking.
no, good question.
Okay.
No, it was designed to just encapsulate what we
night.
said and respond to them, but I don't think we're in a position to play around with the brunch right now if we're either complying with the 99 or not, and I hope you'll continue discussion on that, but I don't think we really have jurisdiction to modify it in the current stance, so that's the motion.
Except you have heard her twice say that she agrees to it, and I think if she agrees to it, that should be part of the letter to the select board.
Thank you, that's not my motion.
All right. So that motion's made and
Second.
seconded. Is there any further discussion on that issue? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate you having 4 planning board hearings on a non-public hearing. This was very, very generous of the board. Thank you.
Is this one, next one withdrawn? Or no? Never mind, sorry.
that's okay. No, it actually brings back into play, it's something under A and R.
Right, that's right.
Go for it.
Okay.
So next thing before us is 0519, which is James B. and Daniel F. Rocket. Mr. Bracken, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Don Bracken for the applicant, Dan Rocket, who is also here. You may recall that the special permit was issued for this property, and one of the conditions was that this back lot B have access off of the same driveway that's existing, and that both A and B would share the same driveway. The original plan, B was going to have access along this strip, and the old property line cut across right here. So, yep, do you have the old one? So you can see what the configuration was, but now that the condition is that we share one driveway, it made more sense to reconfigure the lot lines back to this, so that now this is part of this lot, and this will now be the frontage for the rear lot. And then we're going to create the common driveway easement in this area.
Yeah, I remember this like yesterday.
Yep,
That's
yeah?
exactly what we wanted.
because it
Yeah,
was
so,
yesterday.
I'm glad we did
So is this
exactly what you
just a
wanted.
kind of a cleanup thing, just to
Yes.
get it all legal on paper?
Correct.
Because wasn't that a housing Nantucket lot there or something?
This one right here,
Yeah,
correct, and that
okay.
driveway's
Yep,
been
okay.
relocated, yep. So we're also asking for the A&R Mylar plan to be signed in
Okay.
conjunction with this change.
That's great.
Any further discussion by the board? What's the pleasure at this point?
Move approval to the new layout, the new plan.
Second.
That motion's now made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and now you have to resolve the A and R before you at this point.
Make a motion to approve A344.
Great. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That was fast. That was
That's going to bring us to 7263, which is the Reed Pond Properties. They're asking for an extension at this point.
Move to grant the extension?
Second.
And that motion's seconded as well, too.
But-
Um,
I'm sorry.
Go
If in
ahead.
order- I thought you might want the motion on the table first, but I think we need to ask the question about
Yes,
this being
ma'am.
a third extension.
Oh, where is this?
I'm here for representing Repond Properties. My name is Phil Graves.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you
Good.
tonight,
Doing all
sir?
right.
Did you want to go ahead?
Could you explain to us why this has been held over so many times?
The long and short of it, it's been the longevity of the residential building project that took place at the end of the road.
I remember this.
We decided when we binered the road that it was in the
Okay.
best interest of the HOA to wait for the top coat until that project was complete. So that's what we did.
Right.
They punched list last summer. I spoke with Victor about doing the Cape Cod berm and the top coat last fall. He said he preferred to do it in the spring. So I'm actually meeting him out on site tomorrow. So we're very close to completing it, but we've just been waiting for that house to be finished.
I remember this. Okay.
All right. Anything else
Yep.
from the board or from staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yes, ma'am.
just to Ms. Wagner's question, the planning board decisions for subdivisions typically include a condition that all the infrastructure has to be completed within 2 years. And as he mentioned, like, it's really just not ideal to complete it before construction is completed. So, you know, it's routine to get these requests.
Would it be, may I follow, Mr. Chair?
No, please, go ahead.
If you're clear it's going to happen this spring, do we really need to go as far as April 2020? Could we go as far as December 2019?
Yeah, it will be complete by the end of 2019.
Okay, can we modify this to say December 31st, 2019 then?
Do you want to include that as
Yes,
part of your
please.
motion?
Yes.
And the seconder will concur.
Who, that was Nat?
Oh, yes, that's
You
fine.
concur.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, that's okay, don't
I
worry.
hear, I'm just remembering this now.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
9 years ago, I remember this now.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the motion then? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you very
you.
much. All right, so we have a second dwelling, Robert Era, which is on 7 New Street. This is a revision to the site plan. And I don't see anyone here, Holly or Leslie?
I think this is the
Offer
oh, I talked to them. Forgot.
Yes, ma'am, that's okay.
So the planning board approval showed an extra parking space that's not required. I believe they told me there's even a fence that goes across that area of the yard. Anyway, they're having an issue getting their CO because, the existing conditions don't match what the planning board approved.
Yep.
So I think this is a good situation where they're deleting a curb cut on a narrow in-town street and would recommend approval.
Okay. Board members, any questions or any discussion on this one? It's the pleasure of the board then.
Move to revise the site plan as provided.
Second.
Okay. That motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. That's going to bring us to 8089, which is Nantucket Investments Holding LLC, 24 Pocomo Road. They're requesting an extension. Leslie, is that for a year? Or Holly?
Paul's here.
Paul, hi, good evening, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Paul Santos for Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the applicant Nantucket Investment Holdings LLC. The request actually was for 2 years. I believe there was a letter in the file from Sarah Alger in which we requested a 2-year extension to March 6th or March of 2021.
Okay.
And just to give a little bit of background, this is just a fairly simple 2-lot subdivision on Pocomo Road, at which we spent a number of months, years before NHESP with regard to the Mass Endangered Species Act. One of the lots is restricted with regard to a residential building envelope with regard to a number of endangered plants on the property. All the subdivision documentation was filed and recorded this past December. We've been through the land court, and everything is now in place. We're simply asking for the component of the roadway, which provided access to one of the lots, is really the only infrastructure that has not been completed. So, and again, that was part of a permit to the state under the through NHESP also.
Got it. Any questions, board members? If not, what's your pleasure on this?
Make a motion to grant the extension.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second,
Discussion?
for 2 years, right?
Yeah, till March 2021. So that motion is now made in second. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so we got a few withdrawals that we're just going to need to deal with. So the first one is 6618 8 Marble Way. They're requesting withdrawal. And if the board is so inclined to accept that withdrawal.
Make that motion to accept without prejudice.
Got it. And do we hear
Second.
discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Same holds true for 8304 Reliance Way subdivision.
Make that motion to accept without prejudice.
Okay,
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And there was also 6 West Creek Road, was my
That's-
understanding? Okay, so 6 West Creek Road is asking for a withdrawal as well, too. So if you're so inclined to take this,
I'll make that motion.
all right, do
I'm
it.
not sure where it is. Oh, there it is, right there.
Yep, 1619.
Yep.
So I
And I'll second that.
thank you, I really appreciate that. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Okay. So that's going to bring us to 3418, which is, excuse me, Act Natural Incorporated, 17 and 19 Spearhead Road. For the applicant, Mr. Bodett, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Bodett for the applicant Act Natural. Also with me tonight is Don Bracken, is the engineer on the project. Ethan Griffin is the architect, and a couple of the principals. Mike Sullivan and Zach Harvey are here as well. What you have before you is a request for a special permit and a major commercial development request to construct a registered marijuana dispensary at 17 and 19 Spearhead Road. The property as it currently exists is a vacant 11,000 square foot lot. It does exist as 2 lots merged as one by virtue of the Coffin Pit subdivision. What we're proposing is a 4,000 square foot building on the ground that will have a dispensary open to the public, offices related to the business, as well as a cultivation facility and storage for the business as well. You'll see on Don's plan, we're proposing to place 9 parking spaces on this lot. We have calculated it to require 7 under the bylaw. You will notice that we do have 3 curb cuts that I think Don will speak to, which is slightly unusual, although not unheard of, particularly for this neighborhood. I might also add that with respect to parking, obviously the applicant would be willing to accept any of the normal conditions that the board typically requires of an MCD, bus passes, bike racks, obviously. And I might also add that the board should know with respect to parking that they are only proposing to have visits by appointment only. So I think that will drastically reduce the traffic in the area and will certainly help with the parking situation as well. In short, I'm going to turn it over to Don, but I think this project meets all the requirements, particularly the new requirements set forth in the bylaw. This applicant was chosen by the select board recently to hold the second license, and they're in process of negotiating their host agreement. I know that it's been a while since this board heard anything about it, but I know it was held up for that purpose. So at this point, we think we've met all the requirements of the bylaw, and we're certainly willing to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to Don to talk about the technical aspects of it.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Don Bracken for the record. Holly, can you go one drawing up to the existing conditions? As Rick said, the property is made up of 2 lots. Here's the interior lot line. Obviously, the lots will be merged for this project as one property. Currently on the lot, there are 2 curb cut locations where you see these construction entrances that are proposed. The total frontage for the lot is 227.5 feet. As you can see, the lot is fairly level. There's a building to the southwest, about 8 feet off the lot line in that location. If we could go to the next one, please. Here's the proposed layout, using the 2 existing curb cuts, reconfiguring this one somewhat, sliding it a little further to the northwest. This one basically stays where it is. What we'd like to do is add a 3rd curb cut off of Tomahawk Road. With the 3 curb cuts, that actually works out to 1 curb cut for every 75 feet of road frontage. 75 feet is the minimum frontage according to the current zoning on the property. The building itself has 3 entrance points. The front entrance is where customers or clients will come in. This will be the parking area for them, along with a handicap parking space. There's another employee entrance on this side. There will be 2 employee parking spaces up in this area, and then 2 employee parking spaces in this area. This is the delivery overhead door room. If you look at the plans, this is the, you can see on the interior, that's where that work is going to take place to either take deliveries or load up. The front yard setback is measured off of Tomahawk Road, meeting the 20-foot setback. The other setbacks, because it's now a corner lot, of at least 5 feet from each side. Also on the lot, we're going to propose a concrete pad in this area on the northwest corner for a proposed transformer to handle the electrical requirements for the building. In this northwest corner of the building is another concrete pad for CO2 tanks. We're showing landscaping around each of these to help screen them. And then to the southeast corner of the building, we're proposing an enclosed dumpster pad with a fence enclosure and then some additional landscaping. I think that's it, except the drainage for the site. The roof will have a drainage collection system. It will all go subsurface in this area. Everything will be piped around to this area. We meet the open space requirements, and we're below the 50% impervious area for each lot that was considered in the original design for the subdivision. So we'll actually be using less of what was allotted for this property as far as drainage is concerned. And we will connect to town sewer. There are several existing stubs on the property that we could connect to. And I think with that, I'd be happy to answer any engineering questions or continue on with the presentation. Any questions on that so far?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead then. Is there anything else you want to offer then?
I don't think so. I think we'll open it up to questions the board might have, and the principals can certainly answer any operational questions that I most likely can't answer.
Sure. Board members? Questions?
I have a couple of questions. Sorry.
Thank you.
Do I push something? Yes, I do. So I had a couple of questions. One was on through you, the calculations you use for the stormwater runoff are on the 25-year, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, so did I understand from going through this that you added extra capacity in case storms are bigger than that?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the exact percentage, but it is size, slightly larger than the minimum.
Okay, great. Another question I had was regarding catchment of roof rainwater. Have you ever considered utilizing that in some other way than to put it into the sewer system? In this,
No, we haven't. You mean like
Okay.
a cistern for recycling or something like that?
yeah, or
Irrigation?
for
No.
reuse within the building?
No, that hasn't been considered. but,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just a question. And I think the other question I had was basically operationally on the security. In the blueprint, it looked as though there wasn't, and I'm not sure what the security room is, but it seemed to me maybe it should have direct access into the dispensary area, whereas right now it appears in the plans you have to go through a couple of rooms and come around to get into the dispensary area. I just was wondering if that was, the most efficient way for a security person to get into an area where they may be needed.
I'll let someone else answer that question,
Okay.
but back to the drainage recharge area, because we are in the Aquifer Recharge District, we do
Right.
have to recharge that water
Right,
as part of the
okay.
requirements,
Yeah,
to the
Okay.
ground.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
thanks.
not to the sewer. Go ahead,
I think probably Zach can answer the security question.
Sure.
Yeah, for security by regulations of the governing body, the Cannabis Control Commission, we're required to have a separate man trap type area to to, it's from the original medical program, which prevents one patient from being in process while another one's waiting. So that's required. Security, for a security guard of our own, are you referring to?
It says a security room. I wasn't sure if
Oh.
that's just cameras
That's
or
that's cameras and
electronics or something.
and we're required to have our own backup for all of our security tapes that would go for 30 days.
Right.
That also can be hard coded at the will of the police department. I believe we haven't yet in this municipality gotten to that point, but we have the option of hard coding an alarm directly to police.
So then there is not a security person on site?
The security person on site actually will have another role as well, but the security is constantly, again, by regulation, we're required to have someone dedicated to manning the cameras, which are numerous in the exterior as well as in any closed space within the building. So, for example, a building of this size will have 77 cameras,
Okay.
including exterior.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Hollywood. No.
that's about right.
Kidding.
Anyone else on the board?
Just from,
Yeah, please.
excuse me,
No.
from the security question, for receiving, how is, I'm sure there's a plan in place or double doors for receiving, so it's not just open once you get
Yes.
through the garage there.
Not only will there be a second set of doors with keypad lock for so receiving is actually from a vendor's standpoint anyway, but besides the fact that there's actually no cannabis product within there, I mean, going back to this whole thing where everything has to be grown, processed, produced, sold on site. But because of regulations, we're actually required that we'll have to have the receiving and delivery area actually be hidden, so to speak, from the general public. So both there will be either fencing, and there'll also be a set of double doors, which will be coded so only employees that are related to the production can actually be in there. So all the doors have to be either coded or fobbed directly to those employees who are related to this certain action within there. So like a dispensary employee can't go back to cultivation. It allows us to track movements to prevent diversion.
And I'm guessing that emergency exits are alarmed, so if you would leave, the alarm would go off and it wouldn't be able to access incoming by opening up the exit.
Yeah,
emergency
exit only
door.
for emergency. But that's fire code, so that's required.
Anyone else? Judith?
You had said, or someone said, that you're going to be operating by appointment only in connection with parking. Is that for both the medical dispensary and for recreational sales?
100%. With medical patients, actually would be given first priority.
But so as we think about parking here or traffic or anything like that, does that mean you will regulate the number of people coming through in a given day?
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll set our each POS transaction at approximately, so the average from the state is 10 to 11 minutes. We're going to set a 15-minute sort of conservative average of that. So we'll have our appointments set accordingly, so that by nature of when we back into the amount of appointments that we have based on our parking spots, there should always be one extra parking spot for allowing for that 15-minute per point of service transaction.
So for any given 15-minute interval, you might have 8 people with appointments.
Exactly. There'll probably be a small queue of those people who may get there early. Right.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, right. And leaving on bicycle too, I hope.
Pardon?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go please.
I have a question for Leslie.
Yes.
Leslie, in previous approvals, we've always talked about contributions for anything for bike paths and things like that, even though it might not affect this particular area. Has that been discussed with this particular project, or an amount?
We haven't had any substantive discussions about that yet. I mean, this is really, I think, really the first meeting that we've had
Yeah,
to
and
comprehensively
that's why I'm just
discuss
putting
the
on the-
application.
Yeah. Just
We don't have
sort of
any bike
discuss.
path projects in that area at the moment. I know there's been some discussion with some property owners about trying to upgrade Arrowhead Drive.
Hold on.
But that's something that we would need to think about. I don't have something ready to go
Just
right
to bring
now.
it up for discussion for future meeting.
Did you have something? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, I could think of as the coffin approval originally, in the sidewalk discussion. And Arrowhead got left out, and here we are, back to this again. So, essentially, this is, I mean, we haven't talked about screening, we haven't talked about any of that stuff. I mean, there's a whole list of stuff here. I mean, all these requirements about the entrances and, you know, the state laws with these facilities, this is a little new. So we don't want to overcomplicate it with conditions that you can't meet because you're trying to meet the other rules. This is a little different than anything we've ever done before, so. And down in there, it's all industrial, so. So are we looking at continuing this, or are we looking at a full-blown landscape plan? What are we looking for here?
All right, well,
We have all, you know, we have all these different potentials here. I'm just curious as to,
Well, let's turn it over to staff, and
yeah,
she can tell you kind of what the punch list may be.
I'm reading some of it, but,
That's okay.
So you have, Ed Pesci's review,
right.
obviously.
Which hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
It's included.
Oh, is
Yeah.
it? Okay,
Yep, it is.
He's
All right.
satisfactory fine, we just want to know.
okay.
Right. And again, this is the first meeting where the board's having substantive discussion with the comprehensive application that includes everything that they're asking for.
Okay.
They were just awarded the RFQ by the select board.
Great.
They are working, I think, with town council on the community host agreement.
Okay.
And I, don't know what that's going to include, but it might be helpful. As we knew with the Green Lady, some of the things that they're talking about with the select board. And then once that agreement's reached, then they'll, be considered for their letter of non-opposition. So I think we're still pretty early in the process on this. And, you should definitely have an in-depth discussion and maybe continue to the next meeting for, additional consideration.
Can I just ask
Did-
one more question to staff?
No, I'd love
Barry?
you to, please, yeah. I want to get. the
Leslie,
board to-
you just said something, the host agreement thing. So like, we're back to, we've been back and forth with marijuana stuff for 2 years. Who comes first? What goes second? Are we, like, for example, let's say we could approve this at the next meeting. And the host agreement wasn't done, that has nothing to do with us, right? Sort of like a liquor license
Yeah,
for
well,
a liquor store, we're approving the store, but they haven't got that kind
well,
of thing.
before, I think the board was concerned about running simultaneous applications and sort of spinning wheels.
Right,
And now, we've adopted a maximum of 2.
yep,
The select board has gone through their process, which is still in progress, but they've selected the candidate. So I think some of the concerns about getting that stuff in place before you even talk about their application has gone away
Good.
because of the select board
Good.
actions.
okay. Perfect.
I just had one quick follow-up. I was wondering, on this property, do you foresee the potential for expansion or anything? And one of the reasons I ask is because in Canada and throughout Massachusetts and some other states, they've had great difficulty providing, keeping up with demand, let's say. And so, given that everything is inside, it would seem like thinking about the ability to expand would be,
No place to go.
well, that's what I'm asking is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't,
Is there something,
I think they don't want to put the cart before the horse here. I think they'd be happy to have what they're proposing. I mean, I think personally, I've done a lot of these hearings, and I'm looking at this lot, wondering if it can be expanded, and my gut reaction is no.
Unless we can go above 30 feet.
I think, I think it's as big as it can be, obviously, and, having said that, if anyone wanted to expand this, obviously they'd have to come to you. They probably need another lot, which really don't exist in this neighborhood anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I might add that, you know, if it were going to be another lot, it'd have to coexist with this one. So, so I doubt it.
Any other questions from the board? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this, please. Hi.
Hi, my name's David Martin. I'm from Daffodil Lane. I'm a medical marijuana advocate on Nantucket. I'd like to bring your attention to how long this process has gone on. You voiced your question about whether they're going to be able to keep up with the demand. As it is, we're going to go into the summer with one dispensary open and not two. And as a medical marijuana advocate and coach, I know how important it is to have a wide variety of different strains and different dosages and delivery systems, et cetera. And I would encourage the board to act faster rather than slower on this. Medical patients especially have waited long enough for these facilities to be put in place. It's now over 7 years after the law was originally enacted. I'd encourage the board to act and act as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, board members, anything else? Yes, ma'am, please.
I would, once in order, move to continue the hearing until the next meeting, because until we get the host agreement and anything more from the select board, we really can't craft all the relevant conditions. And may I ask Leslie, do you think within a month it's likely that we'll get those?
There's the man right there. You'll want to ask that question too.
You know, I think that we heard today that we'll probably be hearing from Libby and Town Council in the next couple of days. So, I mean, we're optimistic in that respect, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I would encourage the board to keep an open mind to maybe consider closing without it, because they certainly can't do one without the other, obviously. And we can't pull a building permit without that host agreement. It doesn't say we can't get a special permit without it. So obviously,
I think the reason not to close it is that in case there's anything that comes up through that process, we're in a position to get more information or have added speakers. I don't think it's likely there'll be a big controversy about it, but that's my own opinion. Maybe I'm wrong and others would.
Sure.
prefer a
I
different
guess,
approach.
and forgive me if I sounded like I was pressuring you to make a decision tonight.
Not at all. No,
That's not what I meant. I guess
you were giving good advice. I appreciate it.
Sure. No, I guess I'm saying, obviously, you know, we haven't provided a formal landscape plan to you either anyway. So, you know, there are a couple things we need to get you guys anyway. So obviously, you know, we'd agree to continue tonight, but.
I mean, as long as we can, excuse me, Judith, I'm sorry.
I'm all
to interrupt
done.
you.
Thank you.
As long as that's why I asked the question, if you have everything in place for next meeting, and if we don't legally have to have a host agreement to approve it, then there's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with approving it? And we've done this 100 times with other things that have other licenses, whether it's hours of operation in a restaurant, outside. I mean, there's all these crossover things. This is just a new kind of crossover. It's just something we haven't done before, but I don't see any difference.
Right. And I understand the apprehension since everything's new, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, you should want to see those conditions that the select board will put on it. And the only other thing I would ask the board is if we can get some sense of the 3 driveways before we submit a better landscape plan to you.
So that's a fair question to ask. Yes, ma'am.
I did have, now that you mentioned that, because the last time we had talked about it, I mentioned a third curb cut. And it sounds like they have plenty of frontage per curb cut. My question was really about signage. You've got so many curb cuts. How are you going to delineate what's, you know, which is, but then maybe there was supposed to be, are you having a metal gate across that one with the employees? Anyway, that was my question, is signage and how the public would determine which one was theirs.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of limited in what signs we can put there by the HTC as well.
Right.
I think obviously for our benefit as well, we're going to want to hopefully put something tasteful that the HTC will approve at each entrance to make sure people know where they're going. I mean,
Well, I'm just thinking, return.
right, no, that makes sense.
This might be one instance where the onerous nature of the compliance at the state level actually outweighs HDC. So in terms of size of sign, colors were allowed, restrictions on neon, how many signs we can have. So our intent is to make the client and patient entrance as obvious as possible. One of the aspects that we hope to do that in is that it'll be the only place where there's an actual sign. So we're pretty contained by that anyway.
Great. Leslie, did you have something you wanted to offer them, just in terms of a little bit of guidance for?
Well, if I could just comment on the driveways, I mean, from the staff perspective, we don't have an issue with that. I mean, normally we're concerned about pedestrian interaction, and out here, the board specifically required wider roads for larger commercial vehicles and no sidewalks to discourage people from walking through the industrial area. And, there's not a huge amount of traffic in here, and I think for this particular use, the 3 driveways make a lot of sense. But back to the timing of closing the public hearing, I mean, there's still a lot for the select board to work out with them, so I don't think waiting here 1 month really delays the process overall. And, we could take that time to work on a decision so that the board has time to review it while we're gathering additional information for the next meeting.
Okay, I see
Yeah,
it
that
on
makes
your
sense.
head, perfect.
And I agree with Leslie. I don't think there's an adverse effect to having the third curb cut, just especially with this particular lot. On the corner there, I think by trying to consolidate to 2, you'd be eliminating parking, where I think this, the 3 curb cuts actually helps benefit the parking, so I'm in favor of that.
It's all my idea.
That's why you get the big bucks.
There you go.
So move to continue
Okay,
until
that
next
motion-
month.
So that motion is made and seconded to continue into May 13th. Discussion on the issue. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. That's going to bring us to 1919, which is Berryberry Holdings LLC, 10.5 Cherry Street. Good evening, how are you?
Good evening, Jessie Brescia for the applicant. So it's a 2-unit condominium that exists on the property now, and my applicant owns one of the condo units and is proposing to, it's the sort of the lower building in the back there, planning to demolish the existing non-conforming dwelling and construct a new dwelling that will comply with setbacks and ground cover. The issue is that it will continue to be non-compliant with respect to the 20% differential. As it currently exists, the difference between the 2 houses is the front house is the quote-unquote primary, and the back house is the secondary, and it is approximately 4.3% smaller than the front house. Those roles will be switched with the renovation. The proposed back house will be the larger of the 2, and the front house will then be approximately 4.39% smaller. So we're slightly, very slightly closer to the 20%, but still going to be non-compliant with respect to that. Otherwise, the idea is to bring that back house into compliance. They're also proposing to build a studio, again, which will comply with respect to setbacks and ground cover.
Grand.
In terms of HDC, sorry, we were there last week, about last week or 2 weeks ago, and we're, again, there's some revisions requested, but nothing with respect to sort of the overall layout or that would significantly change the ground cover of either of the studio or the main house, and they are, or the back house, and they're making some, the client's making some changes to bring back to the HDC. So I'm hopeful that they're going to have that relatively soon, but I don't have any indication from the HDC's last meeting that they have an issue with the overall sort of layout or proposed ground cover set up here.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have one question. How many bedrooms are being added in here, and how many in the studio?
I believe there's 1 bedroom in the studio, and let me see what the
secondary?
Packet, I believe there's floor plans, I think. Let me just see here.
You got 4 on the application.
Did you give me?
No.
Let's see, the existing per the condo plans is, this is the first floor, second floor, and this is the kitchen, bedroom. What to do? 1, 2. So I believe there are 3 currently in the in that back house. Sorry, wait a minute. This is unit 2. Hang on, looking at the right ones. I apologize. There are 3. Is it 3 or 2? Sorry, 2 looks like in the existing back house, and then the proposed back house. We have those.
3 in the primary.
We'll have
4 on the back.
1. I believe there's 1 in the studio, and then I don't have the second floor plans, but I believe there's a total of 3 in the. So it'll be a total of 4 from what was 2. Between the studio and the.
Just looking at the stacked parking and the very narrow, busy street of Cherry Street.
Mm-hmm.
It means that everybody's going to be backing out into Cherry Street.
Correct. I mean, yes, and that's the way the parking is currently set up for the existing dwelling.
Judith?
I understand you're bringing the new structure closer into compliance. Is there a reason you can't make it fully compliant?
It's not. I don't know. We can make it fully the 20% differential, and still stay under ground cover, because we're dealing with the existing front house, which is not under our control. So we can't. It's a
Okay.
condo unit, so we only control our
okay.
unit, and can't force
Okay,
any
I got
renovations
it.
to the front.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Board members, is there anything else?
Who's like the Terry?
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this. Yes, please, hi.
You can see her for 1 second.
Yeah, please, come on down to the microphone.
I'm Patsy Wright. I'm the other part of the condo. Of the-
Just come a little.
Sorry, I'm
closer.
Patsy
No,
Wright.
don't worry about it.
I am Patsy Wright. Testing. Testing, Patsy Wright here. I am the other part of the condo.
Yes, ma'am.
The 10 Cherry Street Condo Association, or whatever.
The 3-bedroom, is that correct?
I am the 3-bedroom. Yeah, right there next to the proposed new buildings. Anyway, essentially, I'm here to support this. I think it's okay with me. I'd like to put that out there because I'm not entirely sure. A couple of the other neighbors are, for reasons that I'm not sure are particularly relevant to what we're talking about right here anyway. But one thing I just want to clarify is that it is my understanding, and even looking at that the larger building is, the larger dwelling is going to replace the existing house that's there now, and the studio is sort of in the backyard. The studio has no frontage on Cherry Street where the main house does, where a couple of minutes ago, I thought I heard you say that they were going to be reversed.
No, sorry. The front, your house, technically, right now is the larger of the 2 dwellings.
Oh, I see what you
So you're
mean.
the quote-unquote primary.
Yeah,
In terms of that 20% difference.
Okay.
And when the back house gets renovated, the back house will be larger than yours.
Yes,
And so-
understood. Yeah,
so
understood.
That was the.
Yeah, no, I thought, well, I couldn't have heard you
You wanted-
the way I did because I'm looking at it, as the way I understand it. Anyway, I'm just here to basically say, as the other condo owner, I'm in complete agreement, and I have no problem whatsoever with what he's going to do. As a matter of fact, I think he's going to take a terrible house that's just been sitting there for so long, getting me upset that I think he's
Yeah.
planning on doing something rather nice there. So he's got no objection from me.
Great, thank you very much, ma'am.
Great.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak? Any last minute?
Move to close the public hearing?
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
Move approval with the requirements listed in the staff report.
So in other words, we're going to make the finding that the ground cover is
Yes.
in harmony with the purpose and intent of the bylaw.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds
So-
better when you said it, Barry. Shucks.
So that motion's now made and seconded, did I hear? I'm sorry.
Yes, second.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. Is there any discussion on that issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And then we just need to dispose of the second dwelling permit that's before us at this point. So is there any further or additional comment?
Okay, no, I move approval of the second dwelling,
Okay, as per staff.
as per
recommendation.
staff recommendation.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too, take care. So that's going to bring us to 2019, which is Hannabia 6 LLC. Sandra, good evening.
Sarah Alger for the applicants.
Excuse me.
My clients, John Sullivan and Sergei Chumak, are here with me as well from Nantucket Marine. This proposal is for a lot, a vacant lot at 6 Hannabee Lane off Old South Road. The proposal is on a 5,000 square foot lot to construct a 4-unit apartment building allowed in the CMI by special permit with the planning board as the special permit granting authority. 1 unit per 1,250 square feet, therefore a total of 4 units. We propose they're all 1-bedroom units, so there'd be a total of 4 bedrooms. We have provided the 4 parking spaces. The property is served by town water and sewer. It is in the public wellhead recharge district, so we will be getting the water quality certificate from the water company. Access to the site, as you'll see, is over a shared driveway with the abutter by way of a gravel driveway. The 2 waivers that we requested were for the elevations of the building and a landscape plan. We received comments sometime yesterday from Ed Pesci. We've had a chance to look at them. We haven't had a chance to go over them with our engineer yet, but they all look doable. The one that we don't think is necessary and we would prefer not to do is the handicap accessible parking space and gravel walkway. On a residential project, I don't think it's required. The property is going to be used for the employees at Nantucket Marine. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anything from staff on that?
I just have one question. And
Yes.
Sarah, I'm sorry to bring this up now at the public hearing. But is there any way, or did you think about designing the site in a way that the building could be brought forward and the parking could be in the rear?
Oh. I don't think we did think about that. Only because I don't think we thought about it.
That's a good point, actually.
All right, if you're going to
Okay,
speak,
sorry.
can you come on up and introduce yourself and,
John Sullivan from
Thank-
Nantucket Marine.
hi, thank you.
We did play over a bunch of different configurations, and we felt this was the most workable. It's going to work out. We would plan to do everything required with the landscaping as far as behind us is a hedge behind us back there. We're planning on doing stuff on the sides and. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, board members, go ahead,
A
Judith.
question on the staff report. This says a 1/2-story apartment building, but the map shows 2.5?
It's 1.5.
1.5. Thanks.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Right, 1.5 story? Oh, 2.5 story.
Yeah, I was gonna say, nobody's doing the 1.5s now.
Number 4. 4
Be hitting your head.
There we go. Anything else from the board? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, if anyone would like to comment on this. So, Leslie, anything outstanding at this point, or is there?
No, and I think any comments from Ed Pesci can be addressed later.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty minor project in terms of
It's already
drainage.
existing stuff there. So, all
Okay.
right, make a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
And, perfect. That motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And what would the board like to do with this?
Make a motion to approve for staff recommendations, even though there really isn't any, to deal with it in the office with Ed's report, et cetera.
Second.
Okay. That motion's now made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. That's going to bring us to 8340, which is Charles Toombs. This is modification.
Duly caught.
Hi, good evening.
Jesus. That's way over there. That's an
Mike
LC,
Conley,
was it?
surveyor for the project, representing the applicants.
Okay. Anything you want to contribute before we start, or?
If you have any questions, that would be fine. I would
Great,
more
that's
than happy to.
More than
answer
happy
them.
to do that. Board members, any questions at this stage?
Wow.
The one thing, the
Yes, sir.
roads from 1972, there've only been a little improvement down near Old South Road. Otherwise, they've been dirt tracks since that time.
Wow, this is 1,000 years ago, yeah.
Right. It was,
There we go.
Dooley Court just got sewer recently installed. Toombs Court has sewer already. It was really just one of the owners said it's a 60-foot radius cul-de-sac. If we, could we square off, so 4 of the lots would be squared off, rectangle, and then the other 4 would still have the curve on it.
Got it. Go ahead.
So what is the point what will be done with the newly created lots?
Well, only one lot, existing lot, isn't built on yet.
Is
Everyone
not.
else has houses on
Right.
it. The 8 lots that we're creating are unbuildable and will go to the abutter, the direct abutter.
Okay,
And so then, that will increase their tax load and.
right, but is it going to be enough that they could then subdivide, or
No.
are there
What's the
covenants
zone?
that limit
Well,
what
I
they
can't
can
even
do?
find it.
I don't think
I
so.
didn't bring my glasses.
No, I didn't look into that, but all the lots, there's not enough frontage. We'd have to take away from one lot to give the other lot to add or take
So
away.
I just want to understand, it's kind of like the community said, we don't need this big cul-de-sac, so let's readjust
Right,
the
the-
cul-de-sac and distribute the land to the people with the lots.
That's correct.
And that's why everybody said, good with us.
Yeah,
Free land.
This is
not
old
a bad
Nantucket
idea.
right now, Judith.
No, I get it. I just wanted to be sure I wasn't missing something.
This is when we just made it all RC out there.
Anything else from
We
the
get
board?
blamed for it now. It's funny.
Leslie Hall, anything you go?
I'm just,
Go ahead,
what is the
Leslie.
zoning there now? I'm still trying to find it. What is it?
So
It's gotta be.
it's R20.
It's R20?
It's
yeah.
R20 back
Oh,
there.
okay.
And
R20, and in the front, it's the
It's gotta be,
commercial neighborhood.
it's gotta be something else.
CN, right.
Yep. And
Okay.
those lots are about 3/4 of an acre. So adding this to them doesn't make a difference in terms of subdivision potential.
Right.
Okay, that's the
Yeah.
key thing right there.
Yeah,
So
the
they're
lots-
they're not frontage for that 75 feet for R20, so,
Yeah,
But you need 40,000 square feet.
138.
yeah,
It doesn't
okay.
make it.
All right, got it.
Just,
Yes, go
just
ahead.
one more question. Sorry, I hate to bombard people with questions when we've had the application in the office for a month, but by doing this, does it have any negative impact on their frontage?
No, well, the lot 31 and 30, that's reduced frontage because it's on the curve.
Okay, yeah.
So they can go down to
They don't get
53,
the extra.
and then will the other two lots still have 75?
Oh, yeah, they'll
Okay.
actually have more. If you go back to the lots,
Okay.
if you,
Oh, I see.
they're all
Yep.
dimensioned right on the plan. They already have 100 and safe below the Toombs Court lot. The Fusaro lot has, bring it down a little bit. The only lot that probably could be subdivided would be Mr. Toombs's lot.
All right, so what
That's a
you're
big
saying
lot.
is what's already subdividable isn't changing?
Right,
Okay, currently?
yes.
Okay,
Right.
all right. I think what Leslie's asking is once they get rid of that circle,
Does it
That-
still meet?
No, it
this
adds.
is still,
Right,
it changes the way the frontage is set up.
yeah.
So what's the average size of those lots? Again, I'm looking and
No, it's
I mean, is there anything at 40,000?
150
Other
by
than the ones that were
130.
already-
I don't have my calculator. Do you have a calculator, Josh?
You'd have to have 150 feet
50
to
feet,
subdivide,
right.
so,
Right.
They're all about 0.7 acres now.
okay.
So they're under
Okay.
3/4 of an
So
acre.
they're just gonna have extra ground cover with big lots in R20,
That's
like
right.
similar to Bayberry. Okay,
Right, and then, right.
got
And
it.
then town gets taxed on it.
No, that's good. I got it now. As long, I mean, that's, we're sort of, this is, first I've seen it, so this is like, you know, this is reminding me of the Low Beach thing, 1973. Crazy. Okay,
All right.
yep.
Move to close the public hearing?
Actually, let me just open it first. Is there
Oh,
anyone
sorry.
who'd like to
Nobody
comment
left.
on this?
Good
That's
point.
okay.
Is there one person in the?
Now that's a totally appropriate
Almost
gesture.
nobody.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. And what would the board like to do with this application?
Move approval of the reconfiguration of the subdivision, I guess I would call it. Is that the modification? Is that what we call it, Leslie? Yes. Okay.
All right. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Look at the signature.
All right, so preliminary plans, you've got number 8353, 8354, 55, 56, and 57 are requesting withdrawals. These were all pre-plans. So unless you want to do them separately, I would entertain a motion to accept the withdrawal without
Oh.
prejudice.
I'll make that motion to
Okay.
accept without prejudice.
Perfect, and I hear the second.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Any other business before us? Great,
Mr.
that's it.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, just one
Yes,
thing
please,
that
no, next meeting's May 13th.
I don't want to generate any discussion on this. But I think we had a very successful town meeting. All the planning board articles were adopted in conformance with the planning board recommendation, which
Thank you.
shows that you had a lot of buy-in. And I already have my list started for next year. So if anyone has any ideas, not right now,
I know.
but after tonight, come in, see us, let's talk about those, so we have plenty of time to work on concepts ahead of time.
Great.
And to
Yes,
follow
ma'am.
on that, I'm not sure if you all know, but Andrew has convened the Open Space District Zoning Working Group to meet the first week of May. So that's one of those that will maybe, we hope, yield a future conversation.
Yeah, perfect. If there's nothing else,
Wish you
take
the
a
best.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time and energy.
Best of luck tomorrow, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, and.
Thank you.
You gotta look at
Thanks.
you guys gotta look at these plans.
It's pollen.
Josiah Barry